Money. It's something we use every single day without thinking twice. We swipe cards, tap phones, exchange bills and coins, all in the blink of an eye. But have you ever stopped to wonder where it all began? What did the very first currency look like? Who created it? And why did humanity decide that we needed money in the first place? The story of the world's first currency isn't just about ancient coins or primitive trade. It's about human innovation, trust, power, and the birth of civilization itself. It's a tale that spans thousands of years and takes us to places you might not expect. Today, we're going back to the very beginning to uncover the fascinating origins of money and discover how a simple idea transformed the entire world. Welcome to the forgotten past. This is the story of the world's first currency. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand the world's first currency, we need to first understand a world without money. Imagine living in a time where there were no banks, no ATMs, no paper bills tucked in your wallet. How did people get what they needed to survive? For thousands of years, humans relied on something called barter. If you were a farmer with extra grain, and your neighbor was a potter with extra clay pots, you'd simply trade your grain for their pots. It was direct, simple, and it worked for a while. But barter had serious limitations. What if the potter didn't need grain? What if you needed a pot right now, but your grain wouldn't be ready for harvest for another 3 months? What if the value of what you had didn't match the value of what you wanted? You can't exactly split a cow in half to buy a chicken. These problems created friction. Trade was slow, inefficient, and sometimes impossible. As human societies grew larger and more complex, as people began to specialize in different crafts and professions, the barter system started to collapse under its own weight. Humanity needed something better, something universal, something everyone could agree had value. And that's when currency was born. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly counts as currency? Is it just coins and bills? Not quite. Currency, at its core, is anything that's widely accepted as a medium of exchange. It's something people trust to represent value. And throughout history, that's taken many forms. In ancient China, cowrie shells were used as money. These small, shiny shells were durable, portable, and hard to counterfeit. In other parts of the world, people used salt, cattle, cacao beans, even large stones. The island of Yap in Micronesia used massive stone discs called rye stones, some weighing several tons. Ownership of these stones changed hands, but the stones themselves rarely moved. But these weren't true currency in the way we think of it today. They were commodity money, items that had intrinsic value. The shells were beautiful, the salt was useful, the cattle could be eaten or used for labor. What made them money was simply that people agreed to use them that way. The leap to true currency, to money that existed purely to be money, required something revolutionary. It required a system backed not just by the value of the material itself, but by the authority and trust of an entire civilization. And that brings us to ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, over 4,000 years ago. Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, was home to some of humanity's first great cities: Uruk, Babylon. These were places of incredible wealth, culture, and innovation. Writing was invented here. The wheel was invented here. And it's here, many historians believe, that the concept of standardized currency began to take shape. The Mesopotamians didn't have coins, not yet. But they did have something just as important: the shekel. Now, the shekel wasn't a coin you could hold in your hand. It was a unit of weight, specifically a weight of barley or silver. 1 shekel equaled about 160 grains of barley, or roughly 8.4 grams of silver. Why silver? Because silver was rare enough to be valuable, but common enough to be practical. It didn't rust or decay. It could be melted down, reshaped, and measured. And most importantly, it was widely accepted across Mesopotamian society. Merchants, farmers, and temple priests all used the shekel as a standard measure of value. Records written on clay tablets show complex transactions, debts recorded in shekels, wages paid in shekels. The system worked because everyone trusted it. The temples and palaces enforced the standard, ensuring weights and measures were consistent. This was a major step forward. For the first time, value could be abstracted, calculated, and stored in a standardized way. But it still wasn't quite currency as we know it. Silver had to be weighed every time it changed hands. There was no guarantee of purity. Disputes were common. Fraud was easy. What the world needed was something even more reliable, something that couldn't be questioned or cheated. It needed the world's first true coins. The invention of coinage is one of the most important innovations in human history, and it happened almost simultaneously in two different parts of the ancient world. Lydia, in what is now modern-day Turkey, and China, around the 7th century BCE. Let's start with Lydia. This small but wealthy kingdom sat at the crossroads of trade routes linking Asia and Europe. The Lydians were prosperous, cosmopolitan, and innovative. Their rivers ran with electrum, a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver. Around 650 BCE, the Lydian kings began to do something extraordinary. They took this electrum, melted it down, and stamped it into small, standardized pieces. Each piece was marked with the royal seal, a guarantee of its weight and purity. These were the world's first coins. Why was this so revolutionary? Because for the first time, currency carried the stamp of authority. You didn't need to weigh it. You didn't need to test it. The king's image on the coin was a promise, a guarantee backed by the power of the state. Trust was built into the metal itself. The most famous of these early coins bore the image of a lion, the symbol of Lydian power. Holding one of these coins meant holding a piece of the kingdom's wealth, sanctioned and certified by the king. Trade became faster, easier, and more secure. Merchants could conduct business without hagiosing over weights and measures. Markets flourished. King Croesus, one of Lydia's most famous rulers, took this system even further. He refined the coinage, separating pure gold and pure silver, creating distinct denominations. His wealth became legendary. Even today, the phrase "rich as Croesus" echoes through our language, a reminder of the man who perfected the art of money. But Lydia wasn't alone. On the other side of the ancient world, in China, a parallel revolution was taking place. The Chinese had been using cowrie shells and tools like spades and knives as forms of money for centuries. But around the same time, Lydia was stamping its first coins. Chinese metalworkers began casting small bronze pieces shaped like those same spades and knives. These were standardized, recognizable, and easy to carry. Eventually, these evolved into round coins with square holes in the center, a design that would dominate Chinese currency for over 2,000 years. The square hole wasn't just aesthetic. It was practical. Coins could be strung together on cords, making them easy to carry and count. 1,000 coins on a string became a standard unit of trade. The Chinese system was different from the Lydian one in key ways. Chinese coins were made of bronze, not precious metals. Their value came not from the material, but from government decree. The state said these coins had value, and so they did. This was fiat currency, money backed purely by authority and trust, centuries before it appeared in the West. Both systems, Lydian and Chinese, shared the same core insight. Currency needed to be more than just valuable material. It needed to be a symbol, a tool of civilization, something people could trust without question. And once that idea took hold, it spread like wildfire. Let's return to the Mediterranean. The invention of coinage in Lydia didn't stay confined to that small kingdom. Greek merchants and travelers brought the idea back to their cities. Within a few generations, Nearly every Greek city-state was minting its own coins. Athens produced the famous owl tetradrachm, stamped with the image of Athena and her sacred owl. Corinth minted coins featuring the winged horse Pegasus. Each coin was a work of art, a miniature ambassador for its city. Coins became symbols of identity, pride, and power. The Greeks understood something profound. Money wasn't just about economics. It was about culture, politics, and prestige. When Athens became a dominant naval power, its owl coins flooded the Mediterranean, becoming the most trusted currency in the ancient world. Holding an Athenian coin meant holding a piece of the greatest democracy on earth. The Romans took this even further. As their empire expanded, so did their coinage. Roman coins carried the faces of emperors, images of military victories, propaganda celebrating the glory of Rome. Coins became tools of communication, spreading messages across an empire that stretched from Britain to the deserts of North Africa. The denarius, Rome's silver coin, became the standard currency for hundreds of millions of people. It financed armies, built aqueducts, paid for grain shipments that fed the masses. The entire Roman economy ran on these small, stamped pieces of metal. But the Romans also learned a hard lesson about currency. When emperors began debasing the coinage, mixing in cheaper metals to stretch their silver supplies, inflation skyrocketed. Trust eroded. The economy collapsed. The fall of Rome was caused by many things, but the destruction of its currency was a key factor. Money, it turned out, was only as strong as the trust that backed it. So what made these ancient coins the world's first true currency? It wasn't just that they were made of metal or that they were portable. It was that they represented a fundamental shift in human thinking. For the first time, value was abstract. A coin's worth wasn't just the metal it was made from. It was the trust people placed in the authority that issued it. It was the belief that tomorrow, and the day after, and the year after, that coin would still be accepted, still hold value. This required institutions, governments, temples, banks. It required laws, weights, standards, enforcement. It required a shared social contract, an agreement that everyone would play by the same rules. Currency transformed human civilization. It allowed economies to grow beyond the limitations of barter. It enabled specialization, trade over long distances, the accumulation of wealth, the rise of cities. It made possible everything from standing armies to monumental architecture. But it also created new forms of power and inequality. Those who controlled the currency controlled society. Kings and emperors used coinage to project their authority, to fund wars, to reward loyalty and punish dissent. The ability to mint money became one of the ultimate symbols of sovereignty. Even today, the power to create currency remains one of the defining features of a nation-state. Central banks, monetary policy, inflation targets, these are the modern descendants of those first Lydian kings stamping electrum coins 26 centuries ago. The story of the world's first currency is, ultimately, a story about trust. Trust that a piece of metal, a shell, a slip of paper, or even a digital number on a screen represents something real. Trust that others will accept it. Trust that it will hold its value. That trust didn't appear overnight. It was built slowly, over centuries, through trial and error, innovation and collapse. The Mesopotamians learned to standardize weights. The Lydians learned to stamp authority onto metal. The Greeks and Romans learned to spread currency across empires. The Chinese learned that value could exist by decree. Each lesson built on the last, creating the complex, interconnected financial systems we have today. But the core idea remains unchanged. Money is a shared fiction, a collective belief. It only works because we all agree it works. And that agreement, that trust, is perhaps the most powerful invention in human history. As we look back at the world's first currency, it's remarkable to see how much has changed. and how much has stayed the same. We no longer carry bags of silver shekels or strings of bronze coins. We tap cards, send digital transfers, trade in cryptocurrencies that exist only in cyberspace. But the principle is identical. We trust that these symbols, these numbers, these bits of data represent value. We trust the institutions behind them. We trust each other. And that trust, first forged in the markets of ancient Mesopotamia and the mints of Lydia, remains the foundation of every economy on Earth. So the next time you buy a coffee, pay a bill, or check your bank balance, take a moment to appreciate the incredible journey that made it possible. From cowrie shells to credit cards, from barter to blockchain, the story of money is the story of civilization itself. And it all began with a simple idea, stamped onto a small piece of metal over 2,500 years ago. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with fellow history enthusiasts, and let us know in the comments what historical topic you'd like us to explore next. From all of us here at The Forgotten Past, we'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep remembering the stories that shaped our world.